following interview has been pre-recorded to protect myself as well as the interviewee. Any opinions shared by the interviewee may not reflect my opinions. Thank you, and enjoy the interview. Tonight's guest is an OG of the Twitch community. Please welcome Karlton to the show.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. Yourself?
I am doing outstanding. So thank you for taking the time. I've now had all the content creators on the show. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a little conversation with you.
So now that you got everybody, does that mean you get what, like a free drink at the local Wawa or whatever
Exactly.
it is you guys have out there?
Yeah, I get a 24-ounce coffee. Boom!
There you go.
So anyway, let's take it back to the roots. So we're going all the way back. What got you into Madden Mobile? Because like most of us, whether we joined the community early or even like later, like a lot of us just know you as like this mastermind of Madden. We don't know your humble beginnings. So like, did you start from the very first iteration?
Oh, they weren't humble. I was I was a mastermind from the get-go. No, so I played the console versions back when it was on the PlayStation 2.
Okay.
And so when Madden Mobile came out, it actually was using the same engine. And so I remember first season, I saw it come out, and I was like, oh, this looks familiar, let's play it. And I hopped in actually expecting it to be almost like a direct port.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, when I was playing console, it was about doing seasons, it was about going through the draft process. Like it was, it was really sort of that type of, PvE type of mode. And I got in there and I was like, this is absolutely nothing at all like what I expected. And so I picked it up and I played the first season, but it was sort of a slow build. I didn't pick it up and immediately be like, yes,
Right.
I have to play this. Really what it was, hey, this is familiar, it's football, it's fun, it's the only thing available. And so you kind of toe dip around it a little bit. And then I think it was probably toward maybe the middle of the first season when it came out is when it really sort of first started to get its hooks in me. And so, yeah, I've been playing since the first season, and have made a lot of friends and a lot of connections along the way. I've been in, aside from, random one-offs to do tournaments, I've been in basically 2 leagues in 10 seasons coming up now, 9 seasons now. And so it's, I haven't bounced around as many different leagues as people have, but I've been here since the beginning.
Which is really cool. Like on console, were you into MUT or was it primarily franchise?
Oh, it was all franchise.
Okay.
There was no online play for me. It was, let's take the worst team, and I think it was always a coin flip between the Raiders and the Lions, and let's see what we can do to make them as good. And so I'd maintain, basically both franchises. You'd have one AFC and one NFC team, and then you'd go and you'd try and get them both to the Super Bowl. And then you would just, go through the whole draft process, franchise mode every year. And so you end up getting a few seasons deep on it. I enjoyed it. It was, like I said, it helped a lot that the engine from the first Madden Mobile was the same as that PlayStation 2 engine. And it was funny because when they transitioned over, I think it was around the time Brett Favre was the cover athlete, when they started transitioning over to the PlayStation 3. At that time, I was getting out of law school, was also sort of transitioning in my life professionally, and so it just sort of got set aside at that point in time. Never expected to pick it back up, and then here I was. I remember I was sitting at a Panera Bread on lunch, and like I saw it like in the Google Play Store or whatever it was called back then, and I was like, okay, let's do it.
So is it out of like the convenience of it just being like mobile, that like you're always taking the game on the go as opposed to kind of dedicating like a screen and like plopping down on the couch like nowadays, like because obviously you and I have like family, we have kids, it's not as easy.
It's not, although I have recently learned with a different game. My kids have started sort of getting into that. It's not an EA game, so we won't
It's cool.
Discuss it here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's certainly a convenience factor. You can grab it, you can play it. You don't have to get everything set up. and it doesn't take a lot to actually get going with it. So the convenience factor is certainly there, but for me it's the community sort of kept me in there. The
Yeah.
game's fun, the game's been engaging, but it's not something that requires an extensive amount of engagement. You look at a lot of the console people that can play 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and it doesn't require that. You can pick it up, you can do it in small bunches, and so it really sort of fits in with where I am personally.
And it is a very different experience on console. The console is much more grindy. Like I've watched like Dustin play, it's like a lot more grindy. Like I just don't get into MUT, and I can maybe get through 5 seasons of franchise in like a year. Like it used to be like, oh, you do that in an afternoon.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
I'm just not a MUT guy like on console.
yeah, I mean, life changes,
Yeah.
priorities change, and it's one of those things where what may have interested you in the past shifts, and
Yeah.
that's not to anyone's fault or detriment or anything else, and that's certainly not judgmental. Your interests a lot of times align with what you are available and able to do, and having the convenience of that in your hand, in your pocket, as the case may be, to be able to pull something out and just, all right, let's auto through these events, and to the credit that I think is well deserved. Like they have, when I say they, EA has done a lot to sort of lean into that convenience
Right.
too. I mean, I remember, I think it was season 4. Like Team of the Year came out. It was a great promo. It was like 2 or 3 weeks long. It was one of my favorite promos ever. But there was no like auto button, no anything else. It was when they were doing the thing where instead of stamina, you had like tokens.
Oh,
You
it
had
was
to
Blitz
sort of
tokens.
pay in, and so there was like a special currency for Team of the Year, and so I ended up saving out like 3 weeks worth of currency to the very end to wait until all the players came out, so I could really sort of target the ones that I needed.
Yep.
And I remember having to set aside like 6 hours to sit down and grind.
So you had to play
Whereas
at each
now,
event.
yeah, and you had to play the same event over because there
Yep.
was like one blitz event, and so it was the same event over and 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 over, and so it just, it was a lot. And so now you have things with the auto button, you have the ability to sort of shortcut some of those things, so you can still feel like you're making substantive progress without actually having to make that time commitment if you're not wanting to do that. If you want to play the game, you can still play the game.
Yep.
But if it doesn't make sense for you, you can sort of box check your way through during times where you may have less availability, and that's nice for me.
And there's a couple good things you brought up there. I'm going to table them just for a little bit because I want to dive into leagues quick. So, like you mentioned, you've only been in 2 leagues. So, like obviously, like you're notorious for being in like 99p. Like I've had guys-
Notorious, huh? not famous.
Well,
Notorious.
famous, yeah.
No, that's noted. Noted.
So like I've had like Ozzy, like Stonewall, and like other guys on this show who have kind of given me like the background of kind of like when TFTP came in and how 99p got established. But would you mind just like for the viewers just kind of going through like your league career and kind of the inception of 99p?
Yeah, so I wasn't around 99p for the start.
Yep.
I was in a league with Vol, and I think the only person left from that original league is named Uma, is also in 99p. So initially I was in a league called Tourney Play.
Okay.
I didn't come up with the name.
It's original. It's cool.
I wasn't the commish, although I think I ended up the de facto commish. And so, I became a game changer in season 3, and there were a lot of the 99p folks that were in there. Stonewall was in there, Ash Cloud was in there, Gary, everybody's favorite game changer, was in there.
Yeah.
Crane was in there. Like a lot of the 99p guys came in, and so I didn't come in sort of through those channels. And so it was one of those things where our league was starting. It was just us starting to sort of lose, and at that point, Ash Cloud then, let's go with, stopped playing the game rather immediately and unceremoniously.
Fair enough.
And so, almost immediately we would not have offered up a merge, but when that happened, it was like, all right, let's go over. And so we ended up merging. I think it was season 3. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it was season 4. I don't remember. But we ended up merging. Everybody came over into TFT, or not TFP, into 99p. from tourney play. And so we've been there ever since, and I think it's worked out well. You know, the league has grown. The league is not exclusively, but it's full of a lot of people that I think are somewhat similarly situated to both you and I. You know, professionals,
Yeah.
family people. You know, there's a lot of leagues that their focus is on sort of much more intense competitive play. We are serious about the competition. You know, we will, depending on which league it is, certainly have expectations for how you're supposed to play it. But it's not going to be, you know, we're not expecting anyone to go pro at Madden Mobile.
Right.
And so, you know, we have now, I think, 7 leagues in the network. 5 of them are in the top 50 right now in the all-time Hall of Fame rankings. And so,
Which is amazing in itself.
which really is, but it's really a league full of sort of similar, like-minded people that enjoy the game, that do take it seriously, and you know, depending on skill level, you know, we try and find people in sort of that range where it makes the most sense to put them. And so yeah, so it's just a network of now I think 7 different leagues of a bunch of different people that's come together. And so you go out and you go every day. You get to go have a fun tourney with your brothers and your sisters, and you know, hopefully you win, and sometimes you don't. But you know, in the end, you know, we want to take it seriously, but not too seriously. You know, we don't want it to be a detriment
Yeah,
to
right.
each other. We don't want people to, you know, we had an LVL 2 days ago. We lost by 7, and I was the last one to finish up, and I had a 4th down and 7, and on the 7-yard line, and with like 1 minute left, I was holding and didn't get it in. Like, you know, I know there are certainly some leagues where that's going to cause big, you know, ripples and issues within the league.
Yep.
And you know, the league is supportive. Like, they're upset you're not winning, but it's a very sort of supportive league. So it's competitive, but it's also, it really is sort of a family for us. You know, we had one guy that got in a car wreck here like 2 days ago. It seems like he's going to be okay, but missed his drives. He was apologetic, and I don't think there was a single person that was concerned
Right.
about
Well,
anything else
absolutely.
other than his well-being.
Yep.
And so, no, it's a great league, and for us, like, I don't want to get too sort of high on the horse, but you know, for us, it's sort of that, you know, that sort of 99p mentality, 99p perspective of we're going to, you know, prioritize the game and not, you know, focusing too much on everything else. Prioritize the game within context of your personal life.
Yeah.
And so that's our focus, right? We want to be
And they're
competitive, but
prominent
not too.
members in the community too. It's like I appreciate their support. You clearly do. Like all of us who stream clearly appreciate like the 99p guys showing up, and not just that, but it's not like they show up and they're hate watching. Like they show up and they're genuinely enjoying themselves. So like that's just like a testament to if they don't want to show up, fine. You know,
Yeah,
like it's awesome that they choose to.
and it's funny too because it's kind of chicken and the egg in that regard too. You know, like I started streaming and Vol was streaming, and this was back when Noob and Logix were also streaming, so it was just the 4 of us. But like the 2 guys that were doing sort of more of the quote competitive type stuff were both 99p guys.
Yeah.
And so what I think ended up happening was a lot of the people that sort of gravitated toward those types of environments ended up sort of gravitating towards, you know, the league. And so we talk about, you know, one of the most successful mergers that I've heard of ever in Madden Mobile is when like the TFTP guys came in. And so, you know, there was a lot of people that came in, Oz, Freddie, M. Childs, you know, a bunch of the guys, Patty, I'm going to miss people, Dave.
Yeah.
But you know, we had a lot of people that actually got to know 99p through the streams. And so then they came in and became 99p. And so it wasn't one of those things where, you know, it wasn't one of those things where we were actively recruiting. But then the people that liked what we had that came around ended up coming in.
Yeah.
And so now you've got more people in your league that enjoy participating in the streams. That's why, And the running joke was that everyone was adding there for a while 99p to their names because we were winning giveaways. And it
Right.
wasn't because there was anything
It's
nefarious
because the
to it.
odds were
It was
high.
just because we had so many 99p guys in there. But the reason we had all those people in 99p were because they enjoyed the streams in the
Yeah.
first place. And that's what sort of brought them in. So it's a great network. Oz, Freddie, and Stone holding it down did a great job. Still do a great job keeping everything because it's tough. We got 7 leagues. It is tough trying to manage that stuff, especially on
Yeah.
like Tuesdays. Where you're looking at next week and you're like, all right, what changes has to be made, right? Who needs to go? Especially when there was a cap on 16. Who needs to go on vacation? Who's out? Who's getting married this weekend?
Right.
You know, trying to sort of move things. But the nice thing about it too is it gives you some flexibility, right? You got 7 leagues you can pull from. Someone in 99p, you know, has a wedding or is going on vacation or something else, like they can go sit, they can go down to, we've got one league that just allows you to get your daily goals. They can go there, you can move people up to try and
Yeah.
backfill that. So
You don't
it's
have to like frantically go to like league recruiting and try to find someone for 1 o'clock.
no, and the nice thing too about the league too, like I said, it's not entirely a bunch of old guys, but there's a lot of us old guys in there. And you know, the joke I made at one time was come for the competition, stay for the incontinence, because I mean it's a bunch of us old guys. But the nice
Yeah.
thing about that is you know, they know when things are coming in terms of like vacations, and so you get some runway with it.
That's really cool. And like, I want to kind of segue because you were talking about like streaming and such. So like,
Mm-hmm.
most of us know you simply as like, you know, like you're the Twitch guy. You're the guy who's been on what, almost 3 years now, right?
I've been on Twitch 3 years. I started streaming on YouTube 5 years ago, season 4.
So like, was it the game changer thing kind of led to that, or was it vice versa that like you kind of just decided, hey, you know what, like I'm gonna start streaming and see what happens, and then other stuff came about.
Yeah, so I was in a long time ago, back before there was a Discord, back before Telegram chats, anything else. There was like a Facebook group, and then Madden, I think it was Madden Mobile Outsiders, and then there was like a bunch of different like Kick chats. I'm not even sure Kick is still an active application,
I have no clue.
but we were in a bunch of chats there,
Yeah.
and I remember there was a promo. It was it Ultimate Freeze? Something came in. Maybe it was New Year's promo, and they did something where they like introduced like a new pathway to the end that was cheaper, and it made me so mad in there. And I was active in the chats, and so I
Yeah.
put together like this huge like thing that was like, this is everything that's wrong with it, and like here's how you're punishing people. Like it was not friendly at all. And then I got invited on the basis of that. That got sent in, and they thought that must be useful feedback. So I got invited in and came in toward like spring, I think, of season 3.
Hmm.
And so, but I came in and I was a sort of competitive community type game changer, like no content, no anything else. Like Noob was there, and there were a couple others that were doing Madden like content stuff.
Yep.
But I was like competitive gameplay, that type of stuff. And then season 4, Hey Steve, Dave started doing a YouTube channel, and they would come and they would play. Then it was head to head. They would play head-to-head drives against one another, and I thought those were like the most fun streams.
Was
right?
he the community
'Cause
manager then, or was he just a player?
He was just a player then.
Okay.
He was in 99p.
Okay.
And then he came in. We brought him in as a game changer, and then he started doing that as a game changer. So, but he came in. He was the first like competitive game changer to start doing actual content. But it wasn't videos. It wasn't openings. It was something that was new. And he was playing on stream with people, and he'd get like 20 viewers, 25 viewers, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Because like here's just something that you know, at this point you're passionate about, and like you want to talk about it. Like we're in chats and we're talking about it all day and everything else. But that has a different vibe than actually this sort of like hangout thing, right? Where you can talk about stuff and show things, and you have the game and everything else. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yep.
And so season 4 then, like I started streaming. I put stuff together and started streaming then on YouTube. And we had some good streams that they still may be out there. Like, it was rough looking at, sort of the setup now versus where it was then, but it was fun. The problem we had is sort of twofold. Firstly, I started streaming when they were transitioning from season 4 to season 5, which was Overdrive,
Yep.
which had its shares of bumps. And
Right.
so it was difficult for engagement there. And the other thing, too, was that, there was no good way to sort of direct people there because it was all loose, right? You still had random chats everywhere, but you had no real good sort of communication
Right. It was
system.
Reddit and Mudhead essentially.
Yeah, and so I remember at that time, it was in season 5, and I think it was after the New Year's. But I remember I joined a Discord that HSD had started, and I was either the second or third person in the Discord. Legend and I both will say that we were the second person in the Discord, but it was the Discord that ended up becoming the Madden Mobile Discord, and so we spent a bunch of time putting that together, and especially now the work that he's put on is far exceeds what I put in or have ever put in and probably ever will put in.
Yeah.
But when that came up, now all of a sudden there was a good way to sort of get people to come in. And so I had the streaming stuff. I wanted to get back into it, and then all of a sudden, in early 2020, the pandemic hits, and it's one of those things where, like, you're here, you're in your house, everyone else is in the house. You sort of start looking for ways to connect and ways to sort of interact with people, and it was like, let's dust off the old streaming
Yeah.
stuff. And so we put something together. Like, I talked to Nick. I was building a studio in the garage, and I was like, Nick, like, I got a special present coming for you. And so, but then we were able to use the Discord to sort of help organize and bring people in. By then, streaming was much more popular. I moved over to Twitch, because the platform sort of lent itself to that. At that point in time, Nick was streaming somewhat regularly on Twitch as well, and so you didn't have people having to set up new accounts. People were already sort of familiar with the platform, so it made sense to jump over to that. And so, yeah, right when the pandemic hit, and it was like, all right, let's start doing it. And so I think the first stream was April 23rd of 2020. So we had a 3-year stream anniversary earlier this year.
Nice. Congratulations. And it seemed like Nick really pushed that format forward because, like, I remember HSD kind of, he didn't necessarily have his own streams. Like, wouldn't he just come in during, like, the console streams, and, like, eventually, like, Nick broke out into, like, his own thing and has built out this, now there's 9 content creators. Like, it just seems like it's like night and day from, like you said, like 4 people to now.
Yeah, and the HSD, it was kind of like one-offs, right? Like, he would, like, do one, like, here's a promo coming up, or here's this or something else. Like, it wasn't scheduled.
Yeah.
It was just sort of, it was prompted by happenings in the game, and so it wasn't a regular thing. And so, yeah, Nick really started doing that regularly. And then, like I said, Noob and Logix were going. I think Logix was on Saturday. Noob had Sundays locked down, and so Nick sort of really was responsible for pushing, the Twitch and the streaming and the interactive. And when we first started going, like, there were no giveaways, there were no anything else. And so, in terms of driving people to the community, being able to use the Discord to do that, and then, introducing the whole giveaway system and everything else, like, it really opened up a lot of ways to drive engagement, to drive people to the streams. And so I was doing that. Vol came in, Vol started doing it, and it's sort of snowballs from there, right? Like, you do it, you have fun, you're successful with it, other people see it, and they're like, hey, maybe I could do this.
Yeah,
And so
you
they
inspire
try
other
it,
people.
and it just sort of snowballs from there. And so, yeah, but I mean, really at the nexus of that was 2 community managers, Nick really pushing streaming forward, supporting everybody coming in. It was huge. And then HSD and then Nick working to sort of build the Discord and creating a way to connect with people are absolutely instrumental. I mean, those two things were foundational to the backbone of the entire streaming process that we have now.
And like one of the big draws, like so, like you had brought up like you're a competitive guy, and I think that like your target audience, a lot of it is like competitive players because you have these tournaments. Like, how did the tournaments come about? Was that something that was there from the beginning, or did that come over time?
No, it wasn't there from the beginning. I wanted to do something competitive. That, like you said, that was the focus. I couldn't find a way to do it, and so we were playing, we were playing like arena, and we were doing that, and we would do spin times, and we had one night they had like one of the draft tournaments or something else, and I was up to like 1 o'clock in the morning. I had like a 5.5 marathon hour marathon stream to do it, and it was like, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. I would be really curious to see what happens if there was some way to sort of track this.
Yep.
And so, for me, like there was nothing out there at all for it. So I started trying to build like a bot, just it was as basic as it could be, right? Enter a score, right? And then put the score into a spreadsheet and we'll put it up. And so I built one that functioned, which is probably generous,
Yeah.
and we'll call it proof of concept.
Hmm.
And we put it in there, and when we started having like normal amount of people wanting to do it, it just choked itself out because it was just very inefficient. It was very rudimentary.
Hmm.
I'm not a programmer by profession, and so that was when Bondo sort of stepped in, and Bondo was like, I think we can make this a lot better. So we already had proof of concept at that point.
Yep.
Interest was there. And so Bondo was the one that actually took it from something that was just limping along and me having to constantly fiddle with it and people wait, and sort of really just making all of the necessary improvements, not just for quality of life, but really for basic functioning at that
Right.
point.
Like you want to make
And
sure if
so
someone's recording their score that it's actually like reading the prompt.
Well, and yeah, and so it would just get choked out. It had like a bunch of calls, and so it was timing out. And like I said, it just, for like one person to put something in, it works, but the volume that it needed to handle, like there's no way I would have been able to program that.
Yep.
And so, yeah, Bonda, in terms of really sort of once at that point, we sort of had an established audience and process, and we were looking to implement tournaments. Like Bonda was really sort of the next huge step in terms of being able to get that taken care of. The stream certainly took on a much better trajectory once he got involved and fixed it.
So let's talk about 23 and primarily
Okay.
like relating to your stream. So like I remember last year you had a rough patch because like you didn't have the tickets, or it was the ticketing arena that
Yes,
obviously
you had to
caused
pay.
that caused problems
You
with
had
the
to
tournament.
pay.
So and not, and
Um,
beyond that, like MM22 to some people it wasn't necessarily well received. There was a lot of shards and leveling and this and that. But how have you felt like with 23 right now? Like it's nearing its end. Like has it been a good year for you?
yeah, I think 23 got back to where it was. I mean, the biggest problem with 22, aside from being able to actually have to pay to play, I mean, the biggest problem is something we tried to address, and I'm not sure we did it very successfully, but it was the overall and the leveling was too determinative in the process.
Yeah.
We've tried to create a system where there's parity even between, disparate overalls. And so if you have a low overall that's playing a high overall and you lose, then, how do you sort of compensate the points and adjust the points so it sort of more accurately reflects the, not necessarily the ability, but the performance of each of the
Right.
individual players. And that was really difficult in 22 because you just had these massive overall swings, and you'd have one person that would have 3 kick returns, and you'd have one person that would put up a 0. They'd throw a pick 6, and so now all of a sudden these massive disparities. You'd have people with like 30s and 36 overalls. And so getting away from that, getting back to parity now, we're constantly sort of fine-tuning the bot to try and adjust for it. And so, what we've seen this year is we've been able to sort of really bring in the thresholds between a win and a loss and the overall disparities much closer to one another.
Yep.
I think that has a few different benefits, but most notably, it broadens the range that people can spin into and find a competitive match. So that way we can have, 9,000 or 9,500 overall teams spinning into a 7,500, 8,000 overall team. And you can still have a good competitive match, whereas that would have been a 30 to nothing, shellacking last season.
And
So
it
it's
seems like
just,
confidence from like players is much higher, like going into it. Like last year, like I've used this example, you're the slaughterer or slaughtery last year, is that you went into that game and you pretty much knew what the outcome was going to be. Like this year, it feels like even if you're down whatever, like 2,000 overall, like you still have a shot.
yeah, it's hard to sell a skill based game when
Right.
skill no longer matters,
Yep.
and that's where we got to last year, and I think a lot of the changes that came in this year really sort of recognized that too, and so it went back to the skilled players are able to still perform well generally. Doesn't mean it's going to be a cakewalk for them either. It doesn't mean there's not going to be an advantage,
Right.
for higher overalls. Although we've had conversations about how some of those adjustments get made too. But I think that the focus this year really has been sort of returning some value to developing the skill as a player, and I think they did do a good job with that this year, and that's helped our tournaments obviously tremendously as well.
Yeah, so 24, like obviously, like you and I are privy to certain information and this and that. I gave the same spiel to like noob, but like, is there anything that you're kind of hoping for that? Because like MM23, I feel like the foundation is solid, but like it's kind of how do you build off of that? Is there anything that you'd hope to see in game in 24,
Yes.
such as?
I mean, we can't give away
Right,
the
right.
farm, right?
Because like
No,
if you say something, then it's gonna be like, well, Karlton, that's inside information.
yeah, no, no. I mean, I, whenever we have these conversations, I always try and reference things that Nick or someone else puts out in the public domain. And so, coming into the current season that we're in, there was a lot of talk about how they've heard the feedback with overall disparity, and they were working to adjust and sort of create a system that's more reflective of skill, and they've done that. I think what you've heard now, when especially like when Bay came on with Nick and everything else, is they want to focus on the competitive stuff.
Yeah.
And so, for me, that's something that I've long held and argued that, the competitive is really sort of the backbone of the community. The competitive drives a lot of the spend, like it or not. To me, I felt like that's always been a big incentive. And I've always sort of felt like that didn't always get the respect that probably should have gotten. It got neglected. LVL was stale for a long time. It was the same thing,
Right.
and while they kept trying to put out new modes and this and that, like the thing that they weren't even trying to improve or work on at all was the one that I felt like was driving a lot of the daily usage and the interaction and the spend and everything else. So I mean, to me, I'm hoping that the competitive mode or modes, you know, anything that comes out, they've tried to introduce now point attack. I hope they continue to sort of focus on that, to focus on leagues. I feel like, granted, this is from someone that's had very positive experiences from leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like that's something that also sort of gets taken advantage of. We've had various league things in the past, if it's league achievements or league goals are like in there now, but they don't actually do anything. I would like to see leagues sort of become a mode that's not something that's just on the side. Like I'd like to see it really get shifted
That would be the
towards
core of the
that
game.
focus, and they've done that this year, I think. Although some might argue to the detriment, forcing people if they want to get all their daily goals in to do at least an LVL drive or things like that. But I would like to see that sort of become the focus. And then, sort of the same thing with Arena. Try and bring in new things. If it's weekend tournaments, I know those are well received
Yeah.
in our core community. I don't know what numbers they do outside of our core community. But just sort of trying to find ways to make the game a little more competitive. And we talk about it. Like, there are some issues in terms of gameplay. They spend some time working on blocking and things like that. And there's some other things, too, that certainly I think could, I would at least like to see them try and work on and try and adjust and try and correct and tweak a little bit. So, but sometimes the things that you want to have done are either much more difficult or much more complex than you think they are. They seem simple on the outside, and
Yeah.
underlying issues are maybe a lot more complicated. So yeah, I don't know entirely what's coming in, quite honestly, but I would hope they would focus on those somewhat selfishly too. I mean, those are the modes that I like to do. So
And like before we dive into like the rapid fire, did you enjoy the league tiering? Because like I had people on the show last summer, and like this stuff was coming out, and there was competitive players who were like, "I'm not a fan of this," but then after they got like their feet wet with it, and as time passed, they actually really dug it. I'm curious what your thoughts were.
yeah, I think they've been lost to history. But I remember when it was first announced. We had that conversation on stream, and the conversation that I had, the perspective I had then was there are going to be significant growing pains around this because you would have had 8 years of anywhere from what, like 4 to 32 people in a league.
Yeah,
Like there's going to be, a very strong adjustment curve. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to downright stink
yeah,
for a lot of people in a lot of leagues trying to figure out how to do that. We were fortunate in the sense that we had depth in the network at that point in time, so we could try and sort of adjust, and we were able to, plan ahead once announcements sort of came out and how structure would work. But I think the way it sort of played itself out, it ended up in a pretty positive place. And especially like right now, you start to see people that are sort of peeling back. Leagues are still having to try and bring people in, elevate people up. I think having 16 people in there is a cap, and having parity 16 to 16 with everybody lends itself to better matches. I think, especially in Hall of Fame, there are ways they could make matches better. It seems like it seems like there's a pretty big gap between like 1, 2, 3 and like 18, 19, 20
yeah.
in Hall of Fame, and a lot of times it seems like they get matched up, and so that leads to some issues. You'll have someone that grinds and grinds and grinds in E1, and they get in just under the cutoff. It's a huge celebration. It's a huge achievement for a league to grind all the way up to Hall of Fame. Then they get up to Hall of Fame and they go 0-7, and they average like 160 points a week.
Right.
And so I think there's ways from a matchmaking standpoint to sort of improve some of the parity in that regard. I think there are some changes that you could make with how leagues operate
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like lineup locks, and then coaches are coming in. So it'll be interesting to see how all that stuff plays in terms of gameplay locks or don't gameplay,
Right.
no gameplay locks. Like, can you live counter? Is that an essential element to Hall of Fame? Like there's a lot of different sort of buttons and knobs. I think that would be interesting conversations to have to sort of turn them and just sort of see where the thing goes. But just the fact that hopefully that gets some focus, and the importance of that to the overall system and economy and community in the game gets recognized. Like that would be huge for me, because I've been a proponent for years of it.
Because a lot of like what we saw this year, so like in previous years you'd have like that like 8-person league, and there wasn't necessarily enough 8-person leagues to be able to like
Yeah.
play. So like some league that's ranked 213 is playing like league number 6. So like at
Yep.
least with like the tiering system and having like the 16 on 16, at least you have like in theory like competition playing like competition.
Yeah, and I can't think the last time maybe any of our leagues, except for daily goals, spun into a league that wasn't full.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've got daily goals, and then all of our other leagues are usually Hall of Fame, E1, maybe E2 if they have a bad week, and so you've got full leagues all the way through, and so that's great. That's great for competition, because it at least sort of makes it more likely that it's going to come down to the wire, that I can choke away a match
Yeah.
at the end for all your buddies.
So we've reached the rapid fire round. This is 10 questions that can either
Oh.
be answered with a word or a sentence. They're non-personal questions, so I'm not going to ask you your address or anything like that, unless you want a Christmas card. In any event, question number 1, what's your favorite movie of all time?
This is my favorite movie of all time. Oh, that's a good question. Um, you know, I I was a big proponent of the Star Wars series. Am I allowed to say the series?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
We'll go with that.
Okay,
I'm,
just the
I'm
original
probably
three.
out of the loop a little bit.
The
What was
original
that?
three, or did you like the prequels too, and like the whatever the episode 7 to
Yeah, let's go with the original three.
9? Fair enough.
But you also have to remember too, like I remember when the original three got re-released into theaters. So that was an experience. I remember when the prequels got released was I want to say high school or college age.
Yep.
So now that was sort of the first sort of movie event that I can remember, right? Like movies came out,
Yeah.
but that was like the first event where like, all your buddies went out and you went and you waited in line,
Yeah.
you stood in a
Midnight
long line.
showing. Like people have lightsabers.
There are a bunch of people in costumes and everything else, and so yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of good movies out. So I think you remember the events more than you remember the actual movies
Right.
itself. So no, we'll go with that. We'll
Okay.
go with that series.
Which EA content creator would you want as your doubles partner in figure skating?
Figure skating. Does it have to be a content creator?
Yes. Usually ask like one content creator related question, even though Noob last week said that Crane probably has the most short shorts, and he's not technically a content creator.
I love Crane, man. That dude. Crane has a YouTube channel. Crane has a YouTube channel. He does. He does. Let's go with Noob.
Okay. Would he
Last
be the?
time I saw
Would he be
last
the
time I saw
hoister?
Noob, he's a fairly fit dude.
Okay. So
He's a
he would
fairly
hoist
fit
you,
dude.
like on those like tough moves. He'd be the one hoisting you up.
I think any of us content creators would struggle hoisting any of us other content creators.
It's fair.
I don't know. Maybe Lotus. He might be a little spindly. He's the one. He's the John Hader in our Blades of Glory.
Fair
right?
enough. Yeah, that's a great representation. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh, professional golfer was sort of the pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And then I actually went to college with the intention of going to medical school, and then ended up in a different professional graduate
Right.
setting.
Do you still keep up on golf like as a hobby?
Yes, until the kids came.
There we go.
So after our first kid came, I think I maintained like a 2 handicap.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the second kid came, I just didn't get to play much. And then it probably bumped up a few. And then the third kid came. And then like I went out, I think it was last year, I went out and hadn't touched a golf club in like 2 or 3 years and shot a 75.
Wow. On like a
But
par
then-
70 or 72?
Yeah.
Wow.
But then like I went out again and it was like 82 or
Yeah.
something. Like I just, when you hit like at that point, like you're going to be around the green regulation. It's all short game.
Yep.
And short game's always the first thing to go and the last thing to come back. So you get lucky, you roll in some putts. It really masks a lot of other deficiencies in your game. So I started off the backside. I think I birdied the first 3 holes, and then I just sort of treaded water the rest of the way. Like it was not great.
Yeah.
It was so like 40. Was it like 40-35 or something like that? I had like a 3-hole stretch, and then the rest of the time was just like seeing what I could do.
Well, you still got to live it for like three holes. So that's good.
That's right. Now I'm old. My shoulder's busted. It's hard to swing. It hurts.
Oh.
So it's tough getting old.
What's your favorite flavor ice cream?
Butter pecan, I
Ooh.
say with zero hesitation.
There we go.
Zero hesitation.
Are there any conspiracy theories that you believe are real, within like the what should be discussed on stream? So like we're talking like Roswell and stuff like that, not necessarily other stuff.
Any conspiracy theories that I believe are real? Yeah, but I don't really think they rise to like the level of discussion.
Okay.
Like I think they're just things that people are wrong about. Is that fair? I'm not sure if they're a conspiracy theory.
Do you have
though.
like an example by chance that we could talk about?
No, because they
Fair
end up
enough.
just getting people in trouble,
Yeah, that's fair.
right?
Okay, I got it.
And it's not any of the ones that I think people would get in trouble for like nowadays, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. Like it's weird. I don't know. I don't think there are sort of common held conspiracy theories
Okay,
that I would ascribe to.
we can go with that.
But
What's your,
maybe there is. I reserve the right to supplement my answers.
fair enough. What's your favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? Ooh, it's got to be Superman, right?
Okay.
Sort of the all-American superhero.
Yeah, do you see that there is
And
a
he's the
new
best
Superman that's been
superhero.
cast?
I did, and it's funny. Everyone complained that he wasn't Henry Cavill, and then
He looks
they
almost
like they had
exactly
like
like him.
they had his casting photo, and he looked exactly like
Yeah.
Henry Cavill when he first got cast, and I was like, I
Yeah.
didn't do anything. I'm curious to see where the DC cinematic universe goes.
Right, with James
Right
Gunn
now.
now at the hand. I mean,
Needs-
like, I liked Suicide Squad. I liked Peacemaker. So I'm interested to see what he has in store. And Guardians of the Galaxy were outstanding too.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if sort of that more sort of comedic, lighthearted perspective plays on what I
Right.
feel like is typically a darker, more serious type series, though, right?
Yeah.
Like it works for Peacemaker, it works for Marvel, it works for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
Can you do that with like Superman, or I mean, can you do that with Batman?
They tried that once, and it didn't. The bat nipples kind of ruined it for everyone.
I don't think you can do that. So I'll be curious. But say what you want about the guy. He knows his stuff. He knows his comic books, and he's talented at what he does. So I think the choice to co-lead the DC cinematic universe was a good one. It'll be interesting to see what he does and with those properties.
So we actually touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you still own a console, or do you do any like PC gaming at this point, or is it just like Madden Mobile now?
We own a Switch.
Okay.
And we got the Switch when the pandemic was first getting geared up too.
Well,
There's
lucky
a
because
game
they
that
were
was
short to come by.
we got the last one at our local. Actually, we had to drive 45 minutes to a Walmart to get
Yeah.
one. We got the last one that was there. Yeah, there was a game that was released that my wife enjoyed playing, and now all of our girls, including our 3-year-old, enjoys playing. And then I had a game that was, sort of in one of my favorites that was released for N64. My favorite game of all time was released for N64, and then there were a more recent version. The second one just dropped here in the past couple months.
I know what you're getting at. I know what you're getting at. Yes.
And so it's funny, all of our girls, they've gotten invested in the story and everything else. We beat the first one. They were all sitting around, like, cheering, watching the cinematic endings to it. So, no, we have a Switch, and so we play it, and the girls all have games that they enjoy playing, too. So, no, it's been good for them, I think. It's been fun to watch them sort of jump into an environment that I was somewhat pretty heavily involved in when I was their age.
And that's really cool. Like I did get like a PS5 because it was one of those like I need it because I can't get it, and then I got it, and it's pretty much just collecting dust.
I can't justify the
Yeah,
expense. Like the Switch, I can be like, hey girls, go play this.
Yeah.
And I got our youngest to really enjoy watching me play
Yeah.
the game, and so she's like, Dad, go play this. And it's like, well, if I have to twist my arm, I will go play my game while you watch. So
Awesome.
it's been good, but I don't think I could make the same argument for a PlayStation or an Xbox.
That's fair. Oh, I have 3 more. This is the one that everyone wants to know. Could you beat Stonewall in arm wrestling?
Arm wrestling.
Yeah.
Right now, no.
Okay.
I told you my shoulder's just all sorts of busted up. It's my right one too.
See.
And I think Stone's slender, but I feel like he's like sneaky strong.
He's
You know what I
scrappy.
mean?
Yeah.
Not even scrappy. Plus he's he's taller. He's probably got longer appendages, so he can get some leverage. Right?
Yeah.
He can just flip the hat. Go full over the top on it. So I would say right now, especially right-handed, no. I don't think I could. Like I said, I'm a beat-up old man.
Fair enough.
And Stone's just an old man. I don't think he's beat up.
So like this is something like I have like no basis of knowledge for this question at all. Like I hear like your stream playlist. Like I can make generalizations, but like, what song or band are you listening to right now? Like I'm huge into music. Like music's like a major part of like my stream. Like I try to like recommend stuff like throughout like the stream of like stuff I'm listening to. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. What have you been listening to?
So I grew up in sort of the midst slash tail end of the sort of late 90s, mid 90s Seattle grunge
Mm-hmm.
alternative rock scene. So those always sort of had a special place in my heart. Soundgarden's, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, anything that came out of that
Yeah.
was obviously huge for me, as well as things that didn't come out of that. Like I remember the first CDs I got from, was it BMG? It was one of those like get six
The
CDs
mail-in
for
ones.
a penny, and it was I'm trying I used to have all of them remembered. It was Weezer's Blue Album,
Hmm.
it was Green Day Dookie,
Mm.
it was Offspring. I think it was the self-titled one. It was the black one with like the skeleton on the front of it. See, that was red, green. I had Silverchair's Frog Stomp album that
Ooh,
came in with that one,
good one.
which was a great, underappreciated album. And then I had Soundgarden Super Unknown. Maybe it was just five. I got those five with it. So that was a big part of it. I've loved classical guitarist, was a huge Hendrix fan. Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, sort of the maybe early 80s isn't fair, but like the 60s and 70s sort of lead, blues inspired rockers,
Yep.
Jimmy Page and Zeppelin and all of that as well. Was a big fan of that. And then, but like on my phone, if you go to look at my phone, I have two playlists on my phone. I don't have a lot of songs, but I have two playlists on my phones. One is called Dave Matthews, and one is called Not Dave Matthews. So I've essentially bifurcated my musical interests into sort of those two categories, apparently. um, but Dave Matthews is always what gets put on, like if I'm doing stuff around the house or things like that. Like I was working on, my wife could always tell I was working on a project because like Dave Matthews would be coming on through the speaker or the phone or something else. So I mean those were really sort of the group. So like sort of that whole like jam band
Yeah.
scene that kind of came around in like the mid 2000s, right?
Do you
Like
check them out when
Dave
they're
and
on tour? Because like I saw like
I,
literally it's either today or yesterday they were in Camden, like which is like right across from Philly. I didn't even know that they were touring this year.
yeah, they're touring this year. Dave, as an individual act, was in Connecticut last year
Is he still
for
doing it
Sound
too
Down
with Tim
Sound.
Reynolds, or is it just him?
Yeah, yeah. No, he was there with Tim Reynolds,
Okay.
but it wasn't the DMV, and so but I didn't get a chance. We had just moved in, and
Yeah.
the stuff didn't. But I'm not a big concert goer, honestly. Like
Like it
I
depends. Like I'm not gonna be in like a pit and like just throw people around anymore. Like I'm more of like a why is everyone not sitting in their seats?
Yeah, you're that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not a big concert goer anymore. I mean, I remember the best concert I ever saw was Foo Fighters and Red Hot Chili Peppers co-headlined. I want to say in like early
Ooh,
2000s.
yeah.
They came to then it was Deer Creek or whatever it was called. It's been renamed by corporations a few times now. There in Indiana, which is probably the best concert I've ever saw. But it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of the sort of live stuff doesn't sort of live up to the recorded. Everything is now so produced. It's hard to
Right.
sort of reproduce it
Right. Yeah,
in a
like
live
40 layered
setting.
guitars versus like two guitarists actually playing it.
Yeah, and just the vibes are different and anymore too. Like you have to, it becomes a huge event, right? Like you have to go, you have to get sitters, you
Yeah.
have to schedule for like 8 hours, and you have to like drive there. You have to get there early, and you go and you do the show, and the show is awesome. Then you have to wait in traffic to get out, and the lines are ridiculous to get out. It takes
Yep.
you 3 hours to get home, and it's just kind of one of those things where like the concert itself would be fun, but I'm old enough now, like I just don't want to do
You
the
don't want to
rest
deal
of the
with it.
stuff
Yep.
associated with it. So
Yeah.
like I'll just sit at home and just put it on the radio and just be happy.
That's cool.
Reminisce.
I
I'll
mean,
look up
honestly,
YouTube
like,
videos of like Woodstock 94 or something,
there
right?
you go. Like, I'm glad I asked that just because, like, the basis of my musical background is the exact same as yours. Like I'm a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan, even though they were like from
Oh, I love
Chicago.
pumpkins.
They were like the first band that kind of exposed me to everything else. Like I saw Cherub Rock on MTV, and that was like my gateway to like
Yeah.
seeing like all these other bands that like I've now come to appreciate and love.
And Melancholy really sort of stood out independently from everything that everyone else was
Yeah,
doing at that time too. Like it was much more um it was deep in terms of the layers they had. You had yet orchestral stuff involved and everything else. And so it was, and obviously like Billy Corgan has a very unique sound
yeah,
on vocals too. I mean, it was, every once in a while a band comes along that does something completely different and stands out because they do it completely different, but it hits. And
yeah,
that was one of those that hit. They knocked out a lot of them, and then I think that gave a lot of recognition to some of the previous work they had done too, the more sort of rock heavy stuff like Zero and a lot of
yeah.
those songs too.
Yep, I completely agree. The last question that I ask everyone on here, but give a shout out to someone in the community. And like as I've realized from asking this, there's usually not one, but if you want to give one, by all means. If there's a bunch of people, feel free. It's your time.
Yeah, I mean we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the game,
Hmm.
and here a couple 2 or 3 months ago, got announced that they were getting rid of the Game Changer program, and it was a program that EA had phased out in I think every other game years prior. And I've always sort of felt, and I said it then, I felt like that it sort of stuck around because we were very effective and very good at what we did.
Yep.
And I felt like we did a lot of good. And there were people in there that were in there, I think, going as far back as season 2. And so, if I'm going to shout anybody out, especially the OG game changers that were in there that put in years and years and hours of work in terms of discussions and perspective and working with the community, right? If it's Legend and Crane over at Mutthead, or if it's all like the 99P guys and some of the PTI guys that came in that were there for years and years and years, not just the ones that were there at the end, like the ones that came along during the middle, Poots and Matt and a lot of those guys that came in. There were a lot of really smart, really caring people about the game and the community that went through that program. And, so shout out to everyone that sort of put in that behind the scenes efforts, and shout out to EA for listening because, it's one of those things where you don't have to always bring people in that have differing opinions, and it's sometimes easiest not to. Um, but I think there was a lot of goodwill in terms of really sort of allowing us to have and share those opinions for what I think was the benefit. So shout out to all the game changers and to the 3 community managers too that really brought us in and worked with us and did a lot of good for the community along the way.
Because the Game Changer program was entirely selfless. Like no one was making any money on it. It was for the greater good.
Oh, absolutely. And there were a lot of things that came out of that too that would have been disincentives for people to do, right? We had people in the program that people didn't like, and so we had one guy that they got actually had to sort of go into hiding, got death threats.
Jeez.
We had somebody else that people found out where he worked, and not just a company, like the actual building, and like went into his work while he was working and like harassed him. Like there were times that I think definitely unfairly we were viewed as sort of the enemy of different sort of facets of the community. And so no, there are opportunities. It's like I've said on my stream, my sort of privacy and family and everything else is something that's of the absolute paramount importance to me, and those are the reasons why. Because we've seen people show up to
Right.
EA headquarters or people's work, or find out where people live and call in death threats and things like that. It was one that at times we were really sort of viewed as sort of combatants in that process when what we were trying to do was just sort of make the game and the community better for people, but people didn't like the way that we were going about it. So yeah, it wasn't something where there was anything really sort of beneficial to us. It was something where we felt like we were giving back
Yeah.
to the community and we were serving a community that we really sort of loved and were a part of. And so, if we could sort of help, your community in any way, that we were willing to do it. But I mean, believe me when I say it was hundreds and thousands of hours of work that people put in for no real return on it at all to try and make things better. So, shout out to them, and again, shout out to EA for giving us the opportunity, because not a lot of games and not a lot of corporations will allow you the level of access we had, and will allow you the opportunity to provide direct feedback to people from that. So, to their credit, I think appreciation needs to be shown. At least it is for me, for being able to do that.
And just to put like people's minds at ease, but like you still have direct line to Nick. Like he's mentioned you as like you've like recommended stuff like that on his stream. He's brought up that like, oh, I've heard this from Karlton, this and that. So you're still there, like still caring, still putting stuff out there.
Yeah, I still complain from time to time about stuff. No, I mean, you work with someone. Nick's a great example. You build a relationship. I mean, here, what, year or two ago, I was down in Orlando, and like we went out and like did dinner. I think we did like a random like pop-up stream from like somewhere down there in Orlando and everything else. Like, yeah, you build relationships with people, and so, once you sort of get yourself in a position where you have trust built in, I think people are certainly willing to continue to listen when they understand that, they can trust you, and that your feedback is valid and maybe representative of parts of the community. So, no, I appreciate being able to pick up the phone just to, albeit a slightly different medium.
Yeah.
And so now with the content creator program sort of being a lot of the driving force behind that too, to some extent, those things still exist. The responsibilities have just kind of gotten shifted over to different people. But
Yep.
yeah, between the Discord, between everything else, if something comes in that's important, we've got ways to get things through, and we've got people that I think will probably still listen to us.
Awesome. So thank you so much, and like truly, like appreciate your time, appreciate everything that you do for the community, and yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad that we got to have it. So I don't think live we've ever actually spoken beyond just like messages.
No, I don't think so. It's a lot of stuff sort of can get sort of challenging to communicate
Yeah.
through messages. So no, I don't think we've had a chance to speak directly. So I appreciate the invite, and enjoyed talking with you.
Cool. Well, thank you, and have a wonderful night.
Hey, you too. Take care.
That was Karlton. Now a quick message.